The quality of legato that is expected in a singing, speaking, aria recitativo style melodic line that by itself is not very, let's say, attractive, like in, let's say, where the melody speaks itself, regardless of the harmonic dressing, or of the sixth melodically, all these things which make very much of the expression of love, of expression of tenderness, of affection, of emotion, is the appoggiatura of the fifth. Chopin uses very often this device that already Bach has started in this C minor organ fantasy. I can say that if Chopin uses in this auspicious Nocturne Opus 27 number 1 the chromatic, melodic, spoken song, Sprachgesang, calls for that super legato I was thinking first to share with you about, is because I think that the chromaticism in this case is more like a glissando of quarter tone, if possible, through the string instrument. The shortest possible interval, which on the piano is the semitone, obviously. As if there is an extra energy transfer of the finger between the knuckle of the second finger to the third, with a sort of a if there was a glissando of sorts of the string instrument where they just slide, slide, slide to reach the note and then blossom it. Because when you start in C sharp minor and on top of it he starts with the left hand playing only the open fifth in the famous Promptu, he does use the 10th, just like Beethoven in the Moonlight, which is in fact the third for the triad, multiplied by an octave. So the melodic aspect will come after the harmonic has just been a plain fifth, a perfect fifth, in French quinte juste. Of course that is undetermining the gender of the tonality, if I may say so. C sharp minor, C sharp major, nobody knows in the introduction, is that mystery. And when you hear this, the 12th in question comes so much further up, it's so stretched 2 octaves, 3 octaves apart. Then you hear the major, the 10th, and you go, oh, is it in major? Or he maintains this unbelievable tension of expectation between major and minor, undetermined. And most of the chromaticisms in the melodic lines in Chopin are always dropping. Which is the lament, the decay, the descent of the chromatic bass line from the death of Dido. All the chacons and all the passacaglia use the descent in the bass line of the top tetrachord in minor chromatically. often in the melodic line, like in the mazurka. In A minor, while holding the ostinato on the left hand of the A. The point of the story is, I think that there is a bittersweetness in the treatment of the chromaticism in tonality. Naturally, I often think if you play a scale in C major, or you play it in minor, or whichever declination of minor you like, ascending, half minor, half major, or descending minor, natural, some people call it anyway. Whichever it is, it's minor, not major, which is the two parallel, exact, similar tetrachords. So therefore, when you think major, it's clear. When you think minor, yeah, it could be half major in the top. It's more subtle, it's more sophisticated, it's more sometimes undefined. But when you think chromatic, which in Greek means chroma, color, you shouldn't think major nor minor, since it's only semitones. It's no more the tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone of the major, or tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone augmented second, semitone in minor. It's all semitones. Compared to. But for some reason, harmonically, when you treat the droppings of the, let's say, on the way down of the chromatic scale, you can have a moment where you reach the major third and then the minor third. And if you rise, the minor third, or 10th, major. And so you have these moments of bittersweetness harmonically when you have. In the bass line of the famous movement of the descending bass in the Passacaglia Lament Chaconne drop of the tetrachord. This is the quitolis from Mozart's Mass in C minor, but he uses it also in Don Giovanni's overture when he goes. It's in D minor, but on the third chord, you have the D major third. It's not in major, because it's in passing chromatically, going to go to F natural, but the idea that you have this ephemeral major. It's not major, happy major, major of fulfillment, major of finally accomplished. But it's sort of passing major. It's like happiness that doesn't want to fulfill you, or can't fulfill you because you're in such sorrow that you might have a smile in a tear. And so it's this chromaticism, when harmonized in the scale, can bring this hint of major in finally minor. And as I gave these examples, it's mostly descending chromaticism. But in the melodic line of this Nocturne by Chopin in question, he starts with a minor, then he rises it to major. So for a half a beat, or bar, well, a bar, a beat, half a bar, you could think it's in major, and then it immediately goes to the subdominant in minor. So you know that you're in C sharp minor. So this passing tone, slightly rising by the semitone, chromatically, gives that sense of colorization, especially since the opening bar is open fifth. It's not. of, but he didn't. He shouldn't. He shouldn't have. Yeah, thank God not to listen to me. But he didn't have to listen to me. Or perhaps he could have determined the minor more clearly and the major more contrastingly, but by starting with the open fifth, therefore avoiding in doubt, abstain, he bathes us for 2 long bars of this open fifth, and then he plants that natural E, which is the minor third, and we think, oh, that's a C sharp minor piece. When he does the E minor concerto, there's no doubt he keeps in the harmony the full minor triad in the accompaniment before the melody starts. Or in the F minor. But here he doesn't. Even in the E minor nocturne, the accompaniment pattern by itself has an appoggiatura, a fifth, a tenth, the root, the drop, and the rise with the tenth, and the drop, and rise. It's like a big, large hug of expression. It's very emotional. And then when again, the lip of the sixth melodic, like in the waltz. The emotional description of this would be something like an outburst of expressive rhetoric, very much convincing emotional outburst. Whenever this one, there is no, or more chromaticism than he would have. Anyway, so to go back to what he did, and only what he did is this. 3 notes in ascending semi-steps chromatically in the melody. It's not exactly a singing, appealing melody to start with this sort of incremental tiny rises. And to top that, his second degree, which should have diminished 7th in dominant and tonic C sharp minor, he, in the harmonization, drops it to flat 2, which creates a diminished third with a leading tone. So he darkens as possible the harmonic background, if you want, the harmonic colors, or the choice of the background palette. Oh my God, yes. And the melody follows that pattern of the natural and the B sharp diminished third. Shows a sense of creating a mood of total desperation. There is not one single reassuring chord, even chromatically, and because of also the alteration of this degree, of the second degree. If it was would be the expected harmonization of the C sharp minor, here is altered. The hint to the relative major, which should be normally the burst of happiness, like in the first ballad, and then back to the G minor. Here it's not even a burst, it's almost a disappointment to be happy in E major. Oh, whatever good is it to me to be happy? I want to suffer in chromaticism. He restates it. And drastically interrupts the melody as if he catches his breath, and then a burst. Octave played in the right hand, that is to say how much he wants it to be downbeat, flown in the energy. So this moment was the moment where we thought harmonically, melodically, he now established C-sharp minor finally without alterations and chromaticisms. He will be in a comfortable C-sharp minor. Since he doesn't do anymore the D natural, but on the way down and on the way up. digression, I must confess, was very pleasant to do. Liberating, not imitating, not trying to even take it lightly. Just prolong the inspiration from the ingredients of the opening of this nocturne. These improvisatory things that probably himself did, not of course as badly as me. I have no that much loss of humility. When I do these improvisations is mostly because I like to imagine, explore, and just stay a little longer in the puddle. But of course, the reason mainly for this type of example by improvisation in my pedagogical view of things is specifically and precisely to show why he didn't do it. Why it's so banal, why it's so guessable in this case, why it's so predictable, which is exactly the only thing composers don't do of this quality. Chopin, like Bach, like Schumann, like Brahms, yes, we can trace all these little tricks that we could make them seem like, we can reproduce it. It's like the Jurassic Park of Chopin. We're not going to restart it with DNA and rebuild it, because we don't need. He gave us the quintessence of his expression. So we speak through his words. It's like Shakespeare, it's like Molière. It's so universal while so unique and so personal and so precise. That's why you can sometimes feel comfortable enough in a certain musical idiom, as I do, to digress like that. But all this digression proves that he's doing the things that are not expected. In other words, had he died at the end of the page, I doubt that any scholars would guess what he wrote after, because most of the time he wrote something that we didn't expect. We thought, if it wasn't completed by him, and we tried to complete it, either it will be banal like mine, either it would be something, let's say, provocatively harmonic, melodic, pushing the envelope beyond what he would have done, or we think he would have done, because we frame him into a style after which other styles came, of which people like Chopin inspired so much, Scriabin and Rachmaninoff and Mettner and Szymanowski and Rubinstein and many, and this is countless. Who hasn't been come off in pianistic writing an expression of lyricism out of the branch of Chopin? Nobody. As a matter of fact, I think everybody comes from him. And he comes himself from Bach anyway. All this is a chain. But the point of my thought is that at some point the composers do the unpredictable, unexpected, even for their style time period expected. Of course, they don't think outside of their time period, because they only live in their time period. They don't think of us thinking about how they would sound, let's say, a few hundred years later, after atonal music or serial music or post-classical, neoclassical, whatever style genre came up since and left as well since, and whichever perhaps alteration of the tonality, rather the bitonality or atonality, prevailed through Ravel and other composers who customized the tonal system in a way that it made enough room for the expression of their personal expression. And if you say, oh, I'm going to put 6/4 chords on a dominant, and I'm going to sound like Ravel. On the surface, yes, if I do sixths in minor and I sing in the left hand with accompaniment, and I toss in a hemiola, yes, it will sound Brahms-ish, but not Brahms. Ravel-ian, but not Ravel, etc. And therefore, I always find that we, as music lovers, when we try to communicate through the score with the composer's intent, imagination, thought, follow-up, composés, exactly what it means. It's like a composer in French, they say it for the trains, how you compose the wagons. So it's how you organize the follow-up after the initial intent, or perhaps the initial spark of the idea. And that sometimes is guessable, because after all, they have to have an organization of group of bars and tonal tension releases. Of course, there are, grammarly speaking, obvious punctuations, and sometimes they distort it, sometimes they push the envelope, sometimes they interrupt it earlier, even within the language of the tonal system. That's when they reject it. But Chopin didn't feel the need to reject it. Perhaps he might have had he lived longer, because evolution allows to revolve over one's own beliefs and say, oh, when I was young I liked that, but now no. Oh, I should have done this or that. One can say it for one's own recordings of other performances and say, oh, today I could record again this, I'll do it differently, even if it's already written. Let less when you are in the unknown composing the music ahead, which I like to think always of, to be composing being a memorization sight read ahead, as if you retrieve from some deep down memory something that was already, but you couldn't define it, and it comes to fruition through your writing or notation, or perhaps playing directly. And so therefore, when we are in communication with the composer's idea, and we start with the first note, and then we are marveled by the second note, of course we know which will be the third because we played and watch it. But we, like theater actors, we want to give the audience this tension, expectation, manipulation of, will it rise or drop? Will it drop with an harmonization that is not expected? All these things are embedded in the intent, in the decision of the composer to make a suspension and change the harmony, go to the relative major and return to minor. And sometimes then we try to make interpretational choices as a teacher, as a performer, as a scholar, as a thinker, as an intuitive just musician who doesn't have any readings about anything in terms of articles, books, treatises, and just feels the music or tries to connect to the feel of the music of Chopin. Of course, it's more subtle than just to feel, because his music on the surface is very lyrical, and it is a bel canto-like, yes, but also instrumental, and therefore this chromaticism adds to the things, the rhythms, the 5 against 6, the 2 against 3, the secondary voices that will come when he restates the theme. So does he, despite of the melodic expression of the loneliness of the melody and the mysterious accompaniment, adding a second voice make it less mysterious? Does he drop the attention? Does he divide the attention? Or does he dub the attention in experiencing polyphonic, therefore possible two voices in dialogue, rather than one supportive of the other? If it was when he has it independently. It's not just an imitation, it is not just to valorize the melodic line of the diva, aria, soprano of the opera, piano opera, aria, bel canto piano, bel piano, bel canto piano. Yes, it is that he sophisticates the texture to the point to which the intuitive only approach in a way cannot reach far. It doesn't have to disappear and shouldn't be evaporated because of the knowledge, the experience, the understanding, the analysis, the chromaticism, the harmonization. Once you're aware of all these elements, you should still let them evaporate or just enter in the earth, and then just let's see the plant that comes out of it. Photosynthesis, and then you hear the piece. The piece is not only the conglomerate of all these elements that we can analytically, individually or by groups, define and layer out and display, and then put them together and for functions again. It's also that they have some kind of life of their own. And that's why Chopin used to supposedly say that one hand shouldn't play what the other one does and rather ignore what the other one does, as if there is a not only polyphony but polybrainy that doesn't exist, to have independent characters and personalities in each hand, and within the hand even when you have the two parts. And sometimes we wonder how would have he developed it if he had done it differently. And so sometimes he reassures us by doing what, compared to other pieces in similar tonalities, he does. So we think, oh, that's Chopin. Once I've played one, I've played them all. That's not true. On surface, you can say that. Yeah, it's like an alphabet. Once you learn the alphabet, you can read in a certain language. You can read many types of books. Do you all understand them? If they're complex, if there is a philosophy book or a religious book, or is it a cartoon, but it still uses the same alphabet letters, so you can at least access it. But does it mean that it penetrates you at the different levels that is intended by the author? Probably yes, sometimes, most likely not most of the time. But that's fine, because we're satisfied with the level where we can filter it, and then we sometimes are dissatisfied with it and we try to get further. There must be more to it. But the way to decipher it is to have a teacher, like an art historian who explains to you a painting, besides just watching the painting, regardless if it's figurative or not figurative. But even if it's figurative, and it's there are symbolisms, there are attitudes, there are gestures, there are things that are hidden, colors chosen, positioning, displays. So all of a sudden, when you see it with the understanding, do you really lose the emotion of the or the shock or the meaning of the first encounter with the painting? I hope not, because the point of knowing doesn't mean to erase the loving. And I doubt that one studies anything one doesn't love in the first place by curiosity to understand it better, or perhaps to serve it better, or perhaps to mean it better when you play, like you want to mean a sentence. And on which word in the sentence will I bring more the attention, to be or not to be, or to be or not to be? Is it on not or on be? And of course you can play with these interpretational aspects according to a, let's say, teacher, director, or advisor, and then readings, and then observations of others. How does everybody else play my Nocturne by Chopin? Often the students think, and today with the access of recordings online, it's easy to get to have almost a deceiving amount of different options, because everybody's rubato is their own, and they think that is the right, and for some others think is too much, and so you have all these chapels of believing that Chopin is this, and Chopin should be that, and Chopin cannot be this, Chopin shouldn't be that. In interpretation purely, I don't speak about composition, that less, or recomposing Chopin. In a way, people who perform Chopin often feel like recomposers, because there is room to express things in terms of the detail. For instance, this rhythmic loose triplet, and then a dotted rhythm, which is tighter, combined is this, in fact, quintolet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, with a delay of the 5. If it was 5 on 6 in the left hand being sextuplet, it would be, and then it becomes, and then in some treatises we're told that the dotted rhythm on the triplet, in this case on the sextuplet, which is the same, should be aligned. But then it doesn't have that stress dot rhythm. And of course, it shouldn't become either by exaggeration in the other side of the token. Overdotted, double dotted. And because it's a slow tempo, it's easy to oscillate between triplet, dotted, double dotted, aligned, non-aligned, slightly displaced. So it leaves room, therefore, for interpretation that can come in naturally in the flow without to think about it in terms of how do I place all these details as a performer, or perhaps you've done it ahead in your practicing, and then when you display it, when you play the one single time through to share with the audience who hopefully, or most of them, don't have the score in mind, except those who've played it possibly in the audience. But let's say the music lover who wants just to be told a beautiful storytelling, he or she doesn't know what was next, but it's your playing that convinces them, or not, that touches them, that moves them through the music of Chopin. But the details in the interpretation can be a little bit, very much more than a little bit, manipulated. And then of course we come to the text and the original text, and there we become very much more picky so, because then we avoid the exaggerations. But if it's true that I want to play exactly what text wrote, which is 2 quarter notes, triplet, dotted 8 notes, 16th, I would play exactly that. Okay, I purposely, devil's advocate, played it without emotion. I'll try to play it now with emotion while precisely like notated. I think it's more believable, isn't it? If I want to make a point of something, I shouldn't already destroy it by displaying it in a skewed way. But let's say that then I feel like, okay, this is too rigid for me to play a different rhythmic pattern each quarter note. Quarter, triplet, dotted. And I'll just try to loosely flow as if they don't fit on each beat, but they flow into the next first beat. And I feel like this total idea of the left hand not corresponding to the right hand, but they just landing together on the next downbeat. So for 4 beats, it flows. It floats over the left hand. And of course, expressively, Cortot started in the already 30s to display the meaningful note by delaying it from the bass note in Chopin. So it would be... a very expressive device of slightly not aligning the notes allows for enhanced expression and enhanced voicing. It's almost as if you put more makeup on the actor's face, so it's more dramatic in the way the gaze will come up. So perhaps, and that is the problem, this kind of customization of the interpretation, where you can find room for some unalignment, slight delay, perhaps overlap, and then land together only after 4 beats. It gives an incredible sense of floating. Compared to but nonetheless it's notated as it is. Of course you can argue, oh, but in the tradition of the 19th century, when most music was improvised, the notation is rigidified, but in fact they expected you to do something around it. But what, where, how much? Huh? Nobody? Oh yes, everybody thinks they know, but individually. Nobody agrees commonly, and especially not in juries. too much rubato, not enough rubato. Or rhythmically Chopin is very strict, we need to play him like Bach, it's everything is there, we don't need to add our own expression on top of it and therefore loosen up the rapport with the accompaniment, let's say. And others would say not at all, this is what Chopin called for, his start from the starting point of the interpretation of the notation to make your interpretation. Those are contradictory points. There are even disagreeing points. I mean, if our only connection to the piece is the score, therefore to the composer's intent, and if the composer chose not to write the intent unmatching the other hand at this bar, then who am I, Cortot or others, to decide that no, for me this is this, or for me this is that. No, I need to do it because I talk to Chopin, he talks to me. We all enter in this kind of digressions at some point or another because we constantly, in fact, the dead composer isn't dead while we play the music, it's very alive. I don't think any pianist thinks Chopin is a dead composer when they work on playing his music. I think the dialogue, they challenged, they're very challenged, but they don't willingly accept that they'll just play anything goes as their mood comes. Because that would be, of course, you know, the truth is that nowadays, because of the editions, which are very strict, and we have the different Chopin editions from the different manuscripts he copied 3 times for different editions himself with little discrepancies. But let's say beyond these details, we cannot argue that there is a sense of source material for Chopin. Nothing burned, we don't have just some other copy like for Well-Tempered Clavier, we barely have copies, if any of his own writing, or perhaps more of students, or children of his who copied it. So fine, the point of the story, like Chromatic, Courtesy, Fugue, we don't have the original manuscript of Bach. But does it mean that the notation of a given period translates exactly the innuendos to the detail to which the expression sometimes is a little bit freer than only the strictness of the pulse, the tempo, the harmonic motion, the melodic organization, the group of bars, the structure of the statement, the rhetoric of the conviction that you carry when you play a piece. You tell a storytelling with your words, which are his, but with your breath, with your saliva, with your voice as an actor, your timbre of voice. And so you could be more or less convincing with nasal voice or with throat voice. Nothing but in spoken theater, imagine, in song and opera and all that. It takes other dimensions of expression of the meaning. So therefore, the notation is something that remains, I think, to a certain extent antiquated, because the notation is, as detailed as it is, remains, for good or for bad, and I think is for good, with room for interpretation for the details. And that's when some people who like somebody's performance, they say, what a great taste, what a beautiful this, that's how it's supposed to be. I wish I could play it like this, or this is, I agree, I play it like that. If a jury member says, or somebody comes with a new way of doing it, not perhaps totally, but at least in a way, and all of a sudden disrupts the status quo of the expectation. Of course, not by a drastic, provocative playing the funeral march of Chopin's sonata twice faster. That would be just pure provocation, so it's not the point. The point is, in the subtle innuendos, creating a way to organize the phrases that all of a sudden the expected statement that we, either as music lovers or performers ourselves in the audience, or then just an audience member who wants to love it and doesn't know it, receives it. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't think the piece sounded like this. When I was a child, I was always surprised to see how the notation differed from a piece that I had heard first performed. And because of my perfect pitch, I figured out in my head more or less loosely how the notation should be, nothing but the pulse and the beat. And when I would like to play that piece, I would go borrow it in the library and I look at the score, and I'm sure many of you think so too. You look at the score and you're like, oh, is that how it's written? It doesn't sound like it's written. People play it not like I heard well. Sometimes the notation is not the alpha and omega. It's sort of the middleman between the composer's thought and what you make of it when you put it alive back from the dead page and you put the music alive. And of course the instrument, the expectation, the resonance, the acoustics, the architect of the building in which you play. I mean, all things can be enhanced or lost, or some subtleties or articulations gone, or some gained. I think that all these thoughts come to the fact that when we teach the music, the student looks at the score, at the lesson, and the teacher looks at the score, at the lesson. And we both talk about what it means to us, the fingering, the phrasing, the organization of the breathing, the tempo, the traction, the pedaling, the disposition, the harmonization, the movement. How do we put all this in gear? So with experience I say use this pedal after this note so that you don't smear with a change of harmony. Or when you change from the E to E sharp, to avoid that. So you have to exactly determine more even precisely than the publisher exactly where you change the pedal, or if it's half pedal. And if you do the over legato by holding them over by the finger, you do the finger legato pedal, but without the foot. And so you don't have the factual statement of the melody, but you have a melodic statement where the note overlaps. But if it overlaps with the pedal and the damper's up, then you hear this. Well, not plucked obviously, but just for demonstration. As philosophers answer with a question, I often like to say, what do you think? And the student is not there, the recipient, and the teacher just the pourer. I think there is a moment where the both of them look at the score with the experience of the teacher and the first time or second time of the piece for the student. But nevertheless, it's like gift that keeps on giving, or it's like there are so many more layers to this that it can reveal itself differently almost every time you revisit it, even if you know it or you pretend you do, or you hope you pretend you do, because that's what makes you feel like you have some kind of confidence. But then you should remain always a first person to see it every time you look at it, and you say, oh, I remember when I was young, this was awkward, and how did I do this? Like the sixth bar, I would play the left hand accompaniment, and I would, because of my hand allowing, I would play the D sharp in the right hand, but it's notated in the left hand, which gives me more legato by the finger for the accompaniment of the octave. But I cannot teach that if somebody doesn't have the hand to play an 11th with the same hand. And perhaps Chopin didn't either himself. When I was a child in Paris, my mother bought me Chopin's hand from his deathbed, and she told me to always keep it with me. And so I do. So it scares me sometimes because a cut hand's always awkward to watch. And I don't think that Chopin's hand could reach that D sharp G, even if the keys of the pianos of his time were less wide, as they were. And it perhaps ultimately didn't matter, because probably this adoption of the arrangement, good, I didn't drop it. The adoption of a arrangement where you take with one hand or another, or you call with a pedal and you do this in the left hand, or you can suggest to a student want, but you don't have to, and of course you have to, mostly as a teacher, of course, adjust to the morphology of the student's hand. There is no hand that cannot play Chopin, even if one feels, for some students, my hand is not big enough or large enough, or my pinky is not long or something. Everybody finds some defect to their hands, and I think they should think that they have them, and we'll find solutions to play it, because the music is so beautiful, meaningful, and we need to find ways to serve it, and that's why pianists, unlike singers, lucky they have pedal, so they can hold some things that they cannot hold with the fingers stretched. Sometimes the arrangement, or rather in that sense, the redistribution of the hands gives an ease which becomes almost too easy. In the fourth ballade, the arrangement compared to the notation, I'll play it in the same tempo, not to be devil's advocate. Played like it's written, it gives the sense to the pianist to feel like the rising of the mountain, trying to climb, is really an effort, ascending chromaticism again. But when you play it with the arrangement, it becomes deceptively flowingly easy, and there all of a sudden the sense of effort to rise, the chromatic rising of the step, is almost lost. So you have to perhaps play the arrangement for the comfort that we don't make you play wrong notes, or less often than you think. At least it gives you more confidence, but then you shouldn't rush it because it becomes too easy. And here the same. And then take into account that in translation, Chopin's pedaling is according, of course, to the pianos of his time, which compared to today's, and of course he didn't know that, were holding less. And therefore today's holding more, you have more harmonics, more rich tones, and even the whole production of the sound is better with those, or bigger, or wider, or deeper, or longer actually, because of the steel strings by 3, and the metal framework, compared to the wooden that they had with the gut strings by 2, sometimes by 3, but anyway, the sound with the straight strung pianos was more compartmented through the ranges. The modern piano is more homogenized and projects better, and basically is an instrument that has everything to play deeper, louder, possibly faster for the repeated notes, but in the slow tempi to hold longer the resonance of the sound. Therefore the pedal, when Chopin writes pedal legato for the 2 bars of the introduction, if I hold it on the modern piano, as he indicates, a single pedal, because of his piano, probably he was afraid that if you take it off or change it, you will lose a lot of the residue resonance of this halo sound that he wanted to establish. By holding it on the modern piano's pedal, which lasts longer, each beat that you continue repeating, even if you try to play pianissimo, like a snowflake effect, it builds up and becomes louder. And how can you make the hairpin that he indicates, holding the pianissimo with the pedal through the 4 reproductions of these patterns on the 2 bars? It's only by doing half pedal change to maintain it from bubbling loud. So in a way, then, you betray the notation of the Urtext score, which reproduces Chopin's Beethoven's. That's a good Freudian slip. Beethoven's pedalings also poses the same type of trouble to translate onto a modern instrument the intent of the composer. And lost in translation or literal translation, and leads to dead end. In this case, it leads to a bubble sound. Even if I try to play on the surface of the keys, not to be too loud, the cumulative resonance. I'm not pianissimo, I'm already mezzo something mezzo. But in order to maintain it whispered, I have to change the pedal halfway through all the time, and I obtain this whisper opening. establish something mysterious, but that doesn't overwhelm the pianissimo, and he's a sotto voce, low voice for the melody. Or, oops, sorry, that was the wrong note, obviously, but it's the volume of for first E should be just embedded in the harmony of the left hand and then emerge to the E sharp, to the F sharp. Or should it at once be more expressive, outspoken? I think these kind of things come with time. You explore, you test, you try, you're convinced, you're not convinced, you can control, you cannot control. Every piano is different, heavier keyboard, different articulations. Sometimes when you're a young pianist, most of the time you're bothered by the different pianos you have to play constantly. So to make this subtlety happen within very soft dynamics, is a risk-taking when you don't know the keyboard on which you play, since the essence of pianists is to play on different pianos every time. But if playing on different pianos every time is to be accepting to play some kind of a mezzo everything, so that it's securely performed so the note speaks, yes, you're reassured the note spoke. You could put an accorda to make it softer and divide foot pedal to make more legato. It's only blurrier and muddier instead of being defined. In fact, what it is, a pianissimo is not soft in terms of touch or texture. It's intense but far away. As if it was, but few miles away. And you can see it from that far away on the horizon line. So in order to negotiate this kind of subtlety with the keyboard is that you don't want to be surprised to have a hole, a note that doesn't speak, or a note that pops out on you because the keyboard is uneven. So how do you control all this subtlety on an instrument that you don't know? Well, with experience, you learn how to play from close-up. You touch the key before you play it, and you don't play it in this kind of subtle pianissimo before you touch the key, and then you push down deep. This way you have a connected, soft, dynamic legato. But with intensity. It's like intense whisper, because you put a lot of weight from dropping from close-up into the key. You don't try to play on the surface and just caress it as musically you might feel. It has that porous, ephemeral, beautiful, ethereal sound, but in fact it has to be played with intense, deep, straight finger in the key, from the key, or sometimes within the key, fully up, not totally. And this gives you some control for the soft touch. If you're going to play mezzo with the pedals, and then you put the inner corda, and then the right foot pedal for the legato and una corda, it sounds like an artificial fabric. It feels like, but not. But it almost. Of course, very good pianos, modern, well adjusted in terms of their action, and in good concert halls with beautiful resonance, enhance that halo sound that immediately gives some kind of a reward to the pianist in the feedback of the sound they produce. And so if they practiced a lot of without Freudian slip, without pedal legato, then they feel like they can do anything they want. But most of the time you play in not very nice acoustics, or easy ones, at least resonance-wise. It is too much, not enough. And the pianos are not always even, so you have to always control them. And so you have to be more close to the keys to control that. And so, of course, with experience you get better to know them, but from close-up is the only way. And of course, the problem occurs when you start becoming, as a musician yourself, growingly inquisitive with yourself. I'm not satisfied with just that. I want to do more. If it's piano, I want piano. If it's pianissimo, I want pianissimo. And if it's legato, I want legatissimo. And if I put the pedal, then it's smearissimo. It's smearing, smearing, smearing. So I want to do it with the fingers as much as I can in order to obtain, like, and some people might find this legato overlapped too much, almost glued. So they like to hear each note articulated clearly, like a flossed teeth. Well, that's perhaps too much objectively, but compared to, or the blunt with pedal and unicorda. For me, it's like icicles with drops. And of course, each icicle is clearly individual, and then you put them together because of the feet. But that singing of Chopin, the imitative of the bel canto singing of the arias, is into the quality of the legato. It doesn't say how, it doesn't say overlap per se, it doesn't say rubato anyway. We do assign some kind of floating rubato because of the feel. Just like in this bar. And again. That's why Chopin wrote these things so well, because he chose how to organize, like a statement, the halo accompaniment, the melodic line lonely before the second page where he's adding the second bar, second voice. And how he's separating the accompaniment by a 12th with a top, and not all bunched, nor all in the middle. And the change of pedal without to overwhelm the amount of resonance allows for the loneliness of the melody to be heard so. It's an ever-going research on oneself, how to better sculpt, how to better shape, how to better express, how to rightfully say, not better per se, faster, softer, louder, slower. It's right. What is right? What is the right tone for Chopin's nocturne? What is the right tempo for that right tone? What is the tempo for the traction of the accompaniment that will valorize the right legato of the spoken song? Do I find it every time? Do I find it in relation to the acoustics and the instrument on which I play? Perhaps sometimes more than others because of the combinations. But I think that's the beauty of it, is that every time you've played it, it erases itself, vanishes, and you restart it, and you can say, but a few minutes ago I did it, and I managed something that I thought was, and then no. Every time you have to reignite it all, reorganize this mesmerizing harmonization of this universe of music through the notes that talks to our senses, to our thoughts, that questions us, that makes us be introspective. And so with this first page of the Nocturne Opus 27, number 1, you can, in a different way, state the question of existentialism. You know, why, what, and where, and till when. And plunge into Chopin's own mysterious opening, from which you draw the line which he wrote to say through your words the narrative statement for your audience. And I think this ephemeral, beautiful moment ends with the moment you played. So the audience received it, you gave it. You can always go back to it and say, oh, I would like to do it differently this time, or next time, or another time. Fine, that is beautiful, to never be satisfied. But at the moment you deliver it, you have to find the tone that you hope, and then somehow adjust with the unexpected of the moment to make it become still what you wish, despite of your refined research that can lose you in an abyss of questions while practicing it, meaning, or attempting it. And then when you deliver it, you have all these plans in mind, and when you start it, all of a sudden it appears to be as it wants. It's almost its own self, and the piano talks to you and say, I cannot do this, I cannot do that, or can you do that to me? And you say, well, I'm not sure. Does the keyboard bite? Of course it doesn't, that's childish. But in emotional ways, we try to be becoming a unit with the piece, and or the thought process of the pieces, composer's pieces, thought process. More than the composer, I think we become one with the piece while we play it. And it's no more dead composer, past tonality system or something. It is just very actual. It's what you translate with your audience, or with yourself first, and through with the audience after you practiced it. And how they receive it then becomes their own experience on their end of the story, without the score and the knowledge, if they don't, or they do. But even if they do, they will discover it differently. They should have the grandness to say, even jury members, I don't agree, but I think it's good. I wouldn't play it like that, but I discover a way that perhaps I should have thought of it. Or, that is interesting. Or, of course, they can reject and say, this is wrong, it's not the style, it's not supposed to be. Tradition, rubato, legato. It's not my definition of it. Fine, that's their right too. But through life, you evolve, you evolve, you evolve, you evolve. Some things don't, some things evolve, and you try to continuously search with all humility through that thread of what it means to you to play this opening. Yeah, that's what it is. In a nutshell. Thank you.